Have you ever made a decision so bold, so outrageous, that the entire world thought you were insane? What if I told you that one man once took on the Bank of England and won? This isn't fiction. This is history. And today, you'll witness the moment one man changed the course of financial history in just 24 hours. September 1992. London's skies were gray, the kind of gray that hangs heavy, like something big is about to go down. Behind thick glass windows in the financial district, government officials scrambled through economic data. But they were too late. The fuse had already been lit. And across the Atlantic, in a quiet office in New York City, a man sat in silence, his eyes on the charts, his conviction unshakable. George Soros, a name the world didn't know yet. But the financial system? It was about to learn it the hard way. The European exchange rate mechanism, ERM, was crumbling. The UK had pegged its currency, the British pound, to the German Deutschmark, trying to keep it artificially strong. But the economy wasn't backing it. Inflation was rising, unemployment was spiking, and interest rates were squeezing the life out of businesses and families alike. Politicians called it economic discipline. Soros? He called it insanity. He knew something others didn't, or maybe he had the guts to act on what others were too afraid to admit. The British pound was about to collapse. And when it did, it would be the opportunity of a lifetime. While central banks around Europe were praying stability would hold, Soros was preparing for war. His weapon? The global currency market. His strategy? Short the British pound with everything he had, and more. He borrowed billions. He bet billions. And all of it? Against a country. But here's the craziest part. Soros wasn't driven by greed. He wasn't even obsessed with winning. He simply believed, to his bones, that the UK couldn't survive the pressure. And when belief meets timing, legends are born. The question wasn't if the pound would fall. It was when and Soros knew. That day was coming. It was late September, and London didn't know it was standing on a cliff. Markets were jittery. Politicians insisted the pound was safe. But George Soros? He'd already built his position. Quietly, relentlessly. By the time the sun rose on September 16th, 1992, a day the world would remember as Black Wednesday, Soros had shorted more than $10 billion in British pounds. Let that sink in. He was borrowing billions just to bet they would collapse in value. And then it started. Early that morning, whispers turned into panic. Currency traders around the world noticed something was wrong. The pound was under pressure, massive pressure, like someone was unloading billions into the market. That someone was Soros. Governments began scrambling. The Bank of England started burning through reserves, trying to defend the currency. They bought back pounds, trying to hold the line. But every time they bought $1 billion, Soros sold too. The tension was unbearable. Inside Parliament, phones were ringing nonstop. The Chancellor of the Exchequer, Norman Lamont, called an emergency press conference. We are raising interest rates by 2%, effective immediately. The pound is not under threat, he said. We are in control. But they weren't. They were bleeding. In New York, Soros sat calm. No emotion. Just numbers. Every tick down in the pound meant millions in profit. Meanwhile, the UK was raising interest rates again, now up by 5% in a single day. Businesses screamed. Homeowners panicked. But none of it mattered. The dam had broken. By the end of the day, the British government surrendered. The UK pulled out of the European exchange rate mechanism. The pound collapsed, falling over 15% in hours. And George Soros? He made over $1 billion. In a single day, they called him a villain. They called him a genius. But everyone agreed on one thing. He had just broken the Bank of England. Asterisk, asterisk. If you're enjoying this financial thriller, make sure to subscribe. Every week we bring you real stories from the market, full of risk, betrayal, and brilliance. London went to sleep that night, a different city. The flags still waved. The buildings still stood. But inside the walls of government, the foundation had cracked. On September 17th, headlines screamed, UK withdraws from ERM. Pound plummets. Speculators win. But the one that would never be forgotten was this. George Soros breaks the Bank of England. In Parliament, chaos reigned. The Prime Minister was humiliated. The Chancellor, Norman Lamont, stood before reporters, pale, tired, defeated. We will no longer keep the pound within the ERM band. It is no longer sustainable. Translation? We lost. The government had burned through over £27 billion in reserves, trying to defend a currency that was already doomed. They lost not just money. They lost credibility. The British public was furious. Businesses had been strangled by sky-high interest rates. For nothing. Homeowners saw mortgage payments explode. And all the while, a man across the ocean had made a fortune betting they would fail. But Soros didn't gloat. There were no champagne celebrations. No, I told you so. He simply said, I am not causing the crisis. I am observing the flaws in the system and responding accordingly. To some, he was a monster, a cold, calculating speculator who attacked a nation. To others, he was a visionary, the only one who saw the truth and had the courage to act on it. Either way, one thing was now certain. The market listens to George Soros, and the world would never ignore him again. After Black Wednesday, George Soros became more than a trader. He became a symbol of how fragile a nation's economy could be, a symbol of how the market respects no borders, only logic and leverage. And maybe a symbol of how power can look very different when it wears a suit and trades silence for billions. But behind the legend, there was still a man born during war, a refugee, a survivor of the Nazi occupation in Hungary, a man who watched chaos from the inside and decided that if the world was built on systems, he would learn how to read those systems and one day bend them. Markets are often wrong, he once said, but they are not stupid. And on that September day in 1992, he proved both things true. The UK would take years to recover. Politicians would fall. The ERM would eventually dissolve. And the idea of defending a currency at all costs? It died on the day Soros pulled the trigger. But what haunts people most isn't just that he won. It's how calm he was while doing it. Because Soros didn't guess. He didn't hope. He knew. He read the cracks in the walls before they collapsed. And that's what made him unstoppable. So what do we take from this? That the market is a battlefield? Yes. That sometimes the biggest risks bring the biggest rewards? Also yes. But above all, this story reminds us of one truth that echoes far beyond finance. Those who dare to understand the system can change it. And if one man can shake a nation in a day, imagine what you can do in a lifetime.